just the first step out of the hospital with the taxis, the people, the lights, like everything. I was just so overwhelmed. And then the next day I had to go to Exeter. And I remember stepping out of my car and the first thing I had to do was go to a college counseling meeting. And that was probably the last thing on my mind at the moment. I stepped out of the car, I saw people, and I just wanted to run away. I just remember wanting to hide and go back into the car and never come back again.
Welcome, friends. Today I am joined by the lovely Janeva Dimen. Janeva graduated from Exeter and is now attending Wellesley. I believe she is a sophomore at Wellesley. Awesome. All right, well, let's get started. Why don't you introduce yourself, Janeva? Maybe a 30, 60-second intro. Who are you? What do you like to do for fun? What's your deal?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm Janeva. As Kevin said, I'm a sophomore at Wellesley and I'm majoring in classics. I recently declared that, so I'm really excited about that. But I'm also pre-med and thinking about a minor in econ. We'll see. That's a little bit down the road. And right now I'm taking classes remotely in New York City with my family. I have a lot of different interests. I think you can probably tell that by the different majors that I have. Yeah. But I guess we'll go into that a little bit more later.
Wow, Janeva, it's pretty chill, pre-med, econ, and classics. But yeah, before we get there, maybe we can rewind a little bit. Tell us about high school Janeva, and also, how did you end up at Wellesley?
Yeah, so high school Janeva had a lot of things going on in terms of extracurricular. So I have always been interested in so many different things, and that is definitely the case still when I was in high school. And you can kind of tell that from my extracurriculars. So I was very, very involved on campus. Let's see, what are the things I did? I was co-head of Pinoy Society, which is Filipino club. I was co-head of Kirtland Society, which is Classics Club. And a little side tangent on Classics Club. So lots of people like to say that Classics or Kirtland Society was a cult. And I would like to clarify that it is a cult. I think that is pretty obvious. So most people knew Kirtland Society as Kirtamen Club, Kirtamen is like Classics Quiz Bowl, basically. They might also know us from pulling chariots in the front lawn or having gladiator fights with fake swords. So yes, it was very much a cult. But if you think that's a cult, I'm going to tell you about a little subsect of Kirtland Society. And basically, there are about 4 of us or so, maybe. We would go down to the basement of Agora. I think this was it was probably on Sundays, because what we did is we'd have a Bible study, regular Bible study, but it was the Latin Bible, so the Vulgate. So it was probably the closest thing to a cult you could probably think of. But yeah, so I did that. What else did I do? I was also very involved with a lot of alumni relations stuff. So I had 2 jobs on campus. One of them was at the alumni relations office, which was super fun. I loved it. I was also part of STARS Council, which is the Student Alumni Relations Council. Kind of a funny name. I did Dean's Council and I was part of STUCO. And right now I'm still class president for the next couple of years or so. What else? And I also spent a lot of time in the pool. I played water polo and I still play water polo. And I also did JV swimming. And my second job on campus was lifeguarding. And a lot of those things I probably still do now. I'm still a lifeguard. I spend a lot of time at the pool still. I still am interested in classics. But yeah, that's what I was interested in high school. And in terms of academics and social life, that's a little bit complicated. So coming into high school, I was super, super excited because, boarding school, I'd never really been away from home before. But I was also dealing with a lot of mental health issues like depression. And at the time I didn't know it, but I also had anxiety. And that had started in middle school. And there were some traumatic experiences that I had in middle school that I hadn't dealt with until I came to Exeter. And so Exeter, I was really figuring out how to balance all the extracurriculars that I just talked about, and also academics and also my social life. And so academically, my prep year, actually, I did really well, which I'm probably an outlier in that. I would say prep year was probably my easiest year academically. I was still dealing with all of those problems that I had mentioned before that happened in the past, but the way I dealt with it at the time was by, putting all of my efforts into extracurriculars and just kind of forgetting about it, just kind of pushing it to the side. But then lower year came around and it was a lot harder to push those things aside. People started to notice a little bit more. Like my teachers began to notice that I wasn't so bubbly coming into class as much as I had been before. That is actually when I first started seeking help for my mental health. One of my teachers, who later became my advisor, I asked him to be my advisor, specifically because of this one moment. He asked me, "Hey, are you okay?" basically. And then I just started crying. Like, I had never really cried in front of somebody before, but I started talking to him about it, and he basically offered to help me get help. And that was a really impactful experience for me. I'm forever grateful for my advisor, Mr. Friedlander, and also all of the other teachers who would do similar things, would notice when I was not doing so well. They would reach out to me and try to help me. And so that's definitely something that I was looking for in a college. I knew that I wanted a place that was challenging academically, but I also needed a place that was nurturing. People call their colleges alma mater. And I mean, okay, I didn't mean to bring classics into this, but I'm a classics major, so it's gonna come out. But yeah, so like alma mater, nourishing mother. I needed a college that was a nourishing mother for me. And so I was looking around at the time. This was around upper year. So I have a sister who is 362 days older than me, so less than a year. And she was going through the college process the summer before her senior year, so the summer before my upper year. And she was going on all these tours, and I hated all of them. It's like, I don't like any of these schools. And I hadn't considered women's colleges at first, but then she had a tour at Wellesley, and I was there with her too. And I just instantly felt at home. It was like this special, safe space that I hadn't fully experienced before. And I knew I really, really liked it. And I was like, okay, this is going to be my college. And then I find out that it was also my sister's number one. And she applied, she got in, she made it her school. And I was like, oh, I don't want to follow her around again, because she also went to Exeter. I followed her to Exeter, and I did not want to follow her again to Wellesley. But then so these are all the things that I was thinking my upper year. And then senior year, I had another experience. And basically the summer before my senior year, I was hospitalized twice. And the second time was right before a week before I had to go back to school. When I was in the hospital, there were only about 5 or so other kids with me, and it was just a time for me to heal. I had a really impactful experience at the hospital where I was able to just think about myself. So in the hospital, I didn't have my phone. I didn't have any contact with the outside world, basically. It was just me and those 5 other kids, and then our doctors and nurses. And it was a really great experience. But after being in that environment, so mind you, I'm from New York City, and that hospital was in New York City. And so coming out of that hospital, just the first step out of the hospital with the taxis, the people, the lights, like everything, I was just so overwhelmed. And then the next day I had to go to Exeter. And I remember stepping out of my car, and the first thing I had to do was go to a college counseling meeting. And that was probably the last thing on my mind at the moment. I stepped out of the car, I saw people, and I just wanted to run away. I just remember wanting to hide and go back into the car and never come back again. It was very much a culture shock for me, going from the hospital to my senior year of high school. Once I came out of the car and I saw people and I tried to run away, and then I had to go to the CCO meeting, I realized that I wouldn't be able to fully apply myself to all of the different things that I was doing on campus. And actually, I was forced to not do those things too, because my advisor and the administration at Exeter and my therapist on campus at the time, basically they had an extracurricular ban for me. They were like, you are not allowed to do anything. I was very sad about that at first, but then I realized, you know what? Yeah, that's probably best for me. The one thing that I couldn't get away with, though, or the one thing that I couldn't stop doing, though, was Stuco because I was class president, but also because my vice president and my secretary were both abroad. So it was just me and all these events and speeches that I had to do that I was really not in the mindset for, but I still had to do it. So I did it and it was fun. But it was also hard because there would be people asking me, there were a lot of people looking for me. Like, where did Janeva go? Like, she used to be so outgoing. She used to reach out more. And they would ask me to plan these things. There was this whole thing about EA gear where it just wasn't on my radar because I wasn't focusing on Stuco. And then all of a sudden I got this random email out of the blue that was like, hey, your designs are due by tonight. And I was like, whoa, hold on 1 second. Things like that. My senior year, it was a lot of trying to focus on myself and trying to find a place and people that are good for me. I knew at the time that Wellesley could be that place for me. But then I think my experiences senior year, my senior fall, really solidified that need for nourishment and that need for a safe place. And I definitely found that in Wellesley. And so I applied early and I got in and I was very happy. Actually, I remember exactly when I got my acceptance email because I got a notification from Wellesley and I was too scared to open it. So I was in Rome at the time because I was studying abroad with the other classics people. And we weren't supposed to go anywhere by ourselves, but I did. So I went to a restaurant that was down the block from my host family and where we live. And I remember I got into the restaurant, I sat down, I ordered some pasta dish, a peach bellini, and then I was like, okay. And I opened the email and immediately started crying. And then I called my mom and we were celebrating together. It was a really sweet moment. The restaurant was so cozy and sweet. It was just I will always remember that. And then right after I hung up with my mom, this random guy who was sitting across or in the table right next to me and across from me, he was probably around 40 years old, but he started talking to me and he started asking me about why I was crying and all this stuff. And then he asked me for my number and he asked me where I lived. And I was like, oh no, stranger danger. And then, so my celebration was cut short, to say the least. I paid and then I hurried on out of there back to my host family. I told my host family and they were like, oh, which restaurant did you go to? And I told them. And they were like, oh, Janeva, that's run by the mafia. And I was like, whoa, what? This is why they tell us not to go places by ourselves. So yeah, that's just a side story about my college acceptance email.
I think that is probably one of the wildest college decision ritual stories. Dude is like, is everything okay here? He's like checking it out. Wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, you've been talking for a while. There's a lot that I want to break down. I have a question about, mental health and activities. So you mentioned that at Wellesley, you were hoping to find this place kind of that would be really healthy for you. I'm wondering, was that the place that Wellesley was for you? Have you been able to find this balance? Obviously, you still do a ton of stuff, right? You met econ classics, did diving for a bit. Now you do club water polo. So how are you able to, take the time that you need to rest and recover while still working on the things that you love?
Yeah, that is definitely something that I'm still working on, but definitely something I've also gotten better at. So back to your very first question about if Wellesley is the place that I thought it would be. Resounding yes. Yes, definitely. I am so happy that I chose the right place for me. I remember the exact moment actually that I felt like I was in the right place. And that was during my freshman year, or we call it first years because we're a women's college and freshmen. So first years. So my first year orientation, there was a talent show or something like that, like an open mic night or a talent show. It was one of those two. And people were getting up, they were singing these beautiful songs. They had this beautiful spoken word, really great performances. And I was with few people from my orientation group because we were split up into little groups. And I just remember looking at the Cheetos bag in my hand, looking at the Frisbee in my friend's hand and thinking, wow, this would be great for ASMR. And so I just turned to the people next to me and I was like, guys, do you want to do ASMR? And they said yes. And so we got on the stage. I'm not a big fan of stages. I haven't really been on many stages in my life, but I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. And so we got up, we did a little bit, and it was really fun. I just remember feeling so comfortable and safe and at home. And that also translated to my experiences in the classroom too. So my first year fall, I was also going through a breakup. Something I didn't mention before is that I was dating this guy for almost 3 years in high school into college. And then in college, we broke up. And it was very hard for me because he was my best friend. He was the person that I always went to. And it was also a pretty bad breakup. So that was really hard for me. I think that showed in my classes because we had dated in the beginning of the fall, and then we broke up in the middle of the fall. And so in the beginning of the fall, I would come into class, pretty much the same story as with Exeter. I would come into class very bubbly, and then all of a sudden there was this shift. And my teachers definitely noticed, but I think that was a really great experience for me because it showed me who I was surrounded by, and how I was supported and what a great place I was in. Because I came to class, my teachers noticed, and then they asked me to stay after class a bit and talk to me. And so they invited me to their office hours. And I remember one teacher specifically, she made sure that she saw me once a week, that I was not allowed to not show up at her office hours. And she really helped me get through my breakup, actually, because she had a similar experience earlier in her life. And we would just talk about that, and then about models, because the class was under a chemistry department, but it wasn't necessarily a chemistry class. So it was how to model. I'm not gonna lie, when I signed up for the class, I thought it was about the runway modeling. And I was like, wow, this is interesting. Science of fashion, or modeling, very cool. Got to the class, realized, no, it's about atomic modeling, which makes a lot more sense. And how to use things like MATLAB and, all that stuff. Still a really fun class. And actually for my final project, my final project was on Victoria's Secret models, because I wanted to bring a little bit of what I had expected to what I actually did. So I made it into the class that I thought it was going to be, basically. Just teachers like that, they really encouraged me to keep going and they showed me a lot of what I was capable of. There's another teacher too. So Professor Selden, she was so I mentioned before how my older sister, she tends to do things and then I follow her. It's very not true, but Jolena, that's her name. She apparently registered for this organismal biology class. We were talking about what classes we were registered for on the first day. She goes, yeah, I'm registered for Professor Selden's organismal bio class. And I was like, no way, because I was registered for the same class, which is crazy because we didn't even talk about it at all. We wound up having lectures together, which was really nice, actually, because Kevin, as you mentioned, I was on the diving team for a bit, and diving practices were at 5 a.m. Had to wake up early, but I also had my 8:30 class right after that. And so there was time for breakfast, but not a lot of time. So what I would do is I would get my older sister to bring breakfast sandwiches from the dining hall to class. And then I would gobble it up right before lecture, or I would save it for after lecture. And then there would just be that breakfast sandwich sitting on the side of my bag. People were like, who is this person? Back to Professor Selden. So we were in that class. And on the first day, she asked us, what animal would you be? Classic question, pretty straightforward. Everybody was like, oh, I'm going to be a penguin. I'd be a dog. I'd be giraffe. And I say, I would be a vaquita. And most of the class, actually everybody in the class was like, what the heck is this girl talking about? But then Professor Selden was like, oh my gosh, that's great. And it turns out she actually specializes in marine biology, which I didn't know signing up for the class. And so she knew exactly what a vaquita was. And just for some context, a vaquita, you can think about a dolphin. So you've got the dolphin with a long nose, but then shrink in the nose, shrink in the beak, and then also put really dark circles like raccoon eyes around it. So that's a vaquita. It's the smallest porpoise in the world. and it is endemic to the upper Gulf of California. And there are only about, well, we don't actually know the exact number of how many there are left, but if I had to guess, I'd say under 5. So that's pretty bad. But that's also part of the reason that I said I wanted to be a vaquita, because I wanted to let other people know about this species that is going to die. And so, yeah, so I mentioned it in class. Something I haven't talked about yet is that I am really passionate about marine biology. So although I'm not majoring in it or anything like that, I have always loved the water. I mean, the ocean, of course, but also water in general. Like I spent a lot of time in the pool. But I don't know, it's just something that I've always loved. Oh, and I actually took a marine bio class my sophomore fall with Mr. Aronian, who is always going to be near and dear to my heart. I love Mr. Aronian. He's such a great teacher and also super encouraging. Yeah, so I took his marine bio class and I loved it. I was like, it's today, to this day, it is my favorite class that I have taken in high school. It is, I love it. Basically, we would go on field trips and stuff. So we would have these 5 a.m. field trips that everybody else but me hated, because I was used to getting up because of lifeguarding and stuff like that. But I also just really loved getting on the bus and collecting organisms for class. I don't know why. It was just really fun. And he would bring Dunkin' Donuts or like bagels and stuff. And it was just like, yeah. And then we'd sleep on the ride there, and then we'd pick up some algae and snails and then head back on the bus. Yeah, it was a really fun time. But I also learned a lot from that class. And one of the things I learned was about the vaquita and what it was, what's happening with it, because every year he brings in a speaker and she would talk about the problem with the North Atlantic right whale, which is very similar to what is going on with the vaquita. And that's how I learned about the vaquita, because then she would compare what's happening with the North Atlantic right whale with the vaquita. And basically what's happening is they're both getting caught in fishing nets that aren't made for them. And that's why they are becoming, well, the vaquita is almost extinct, and the North Atlantic right whale is looking a little bit better, but it's still not in the best shape. One day after class, I stayed with my sister. I don't even know how this happened, but we wound up talking about vaquitas. And I think that's how she remembers me, as like the one who likes vaquitas or something like that. But yeah, we started talking about it. And then she also started talking about her research that she does at the college. And basically, she looks at how climate change affects the food dynamics in the intertidal zone. One species that's part of the intertidal zone is the European green crab. So there's a European green crab, which is an invasive species, but it's also like more established. So it's kind of like not an invasive species in a way. But then there's also the Asian shore crab. And these are both species that I learned about in Mr. Aronian's class. They are also the species that I used to collect on my grandma's beach when I was like 6 years old. So I'm from New York City. There aren't a lot of crabs around, but my grandmother, she lives in Rhode Island, and she would always bring us to the beach. And what we would do is we would take these buckets and just collect as many of these little green and little red crabs that we could find. And then we'd put them in this like mermaid statue. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's like a mermaid with her hands out and there's like a little shell. So you can put the little crabs in there and we'd watch them fight. And so we did that growing up for many, many years. And I realized in Mr. Aronian's class, like, oh my gosh, those are the crabs that I used to collect. And then talking to Professor Selden, learning about her research, I realized, oh my gosh, the research that she's doing is what I was doing when I was 6 years old, which is crazy. And so she basically encouraged me to join her lab. And that is something I've been doing since the start of this year, which I'm super, super excited about, because we recently, I mean, I'm remote now, so it's not like I can like touch the crabs or anything, of course, but we recently got our crabs in, which I'm super excited about, because now I can watch them over Zoom and watch them fight like when I was 6 years old and make observations about that and feel like I'm being super scientific, even though it's something I've been doing for like a really long time. But yeah, I think I got really sidetracked there. What were we originally talking about?
No worries. We were talking about finding balance and community at Wellesley.
Oh, yeah.
We talked about your professors, and clearly they've had a really big impact on you. And then we got talking about this crab coliseum sort of deal, pitting the crab gladiators, pitting them against each other. That's hilarious. Well, that might be a good segue to talk more about your other academic interests. I mean, you talk so much about marine biology, and it's like not even your major. This is like the thing that, you know, is just something you're passionate about. But tell us about classes at Wellesley, all these different interests. How did those come about? And what is What does pre-med, econ, what does classics at Wellesley look like?
Yes, I definitely have a lot of different interests. Let's see, where should I start? So classics, definitely something I've always been interested in. I started taking classics classes when in 7th grade, I think. Yeah, 7th grade. So it's always been an interest of mine. But I really enjoy Wellesley classics classes specifically because it's a very small school, and so the classes are very small, but classics as a field is pretty small, and so if you combine all of those different factors, you have a really tiny classics class at Wellesley, which is great in my opinion, because then you're just sitting there, you have your readings and you're just translating, talking about the readings, and there's just kind of synergy that definitely happened at Exeter, but it feels a little bit more comfortable at Wellesley. And maybe that's just because I'm a woman and it's all women in the class. So there's no sort of competition for dominance in a way that I felt, that I definitely felt in Exeter classics classes. So I really enjoy it too, because it doesn't just focus on the language, it focuses a lot on history, culture, and all of these different things that were talked about in Exeter, but not fully expanded on. Something that I love about classics in college is that it doesn't just focus on Latin and Greek as languages, but also it puts it in the context of the culture, the history, and the social life. You know, it's a lot more holistic. And you also look at many different civilizations as well. Outside of Greece and Rome, you learn a lot about Egypt, a lot about Spain too. You go all over the world. It's not just Greece and Rome, which I think is really cool and really important in terms of diversifying classics. So that's classics. In terms of pre-med, this is actually a funny story. I didn't consider medicine. I specifically want to be a physician, but I didn't consider being a physician until I got to college. I know most of my friends who are pre-med, they talk about how they were babies playing with their dolls and trying to perform surgeries on them and stuff like that. And that was not the case with me. In fact, for a long time, I wanted to be a marine archaeologist or a marine biologist, which definitely fits a lot more with the other things I've been talking about. But so pre-med, so medicine is something I've always been interested in, but I've never actually pursued. A lot of my extracurriculars, well, none of my extracurriculars in high school involved medicine at all. But the idea of helping somebody and getting to the root of a problem and then caring for them and caring about their life has always been a thread in the things that I've done in the past. I think, I forgot to mention at Exeter, I was a student listener, and that was an experience that definitely made me realize I want to work with people. And so I knew all of these little puzzles, but it wasn't until I started dating somebody else. So I talked about my Exeter boyfriend. My first year after we had broken up, a little bit after, another boy from Exeter, I had gone to, we were in the same class. We were both in Pinoy Society, so we knew each other. We were friends. He always, in high school, he talked to me about girls, and I would help him with his girl problems, apparently. But apparently, he had a crush on me at the time, which I didn't realize. So my lower year is when I started dating the guy that I talked about before. But apparently this new guy had wanted to ask me out, but just when he was about to ask me out, he realized, oh, she started dating somebody else. So there was always that little seed apparently, but I hadn't known it. And then he lives in Newton, which is right next to Wellesley. It's a 20-minute drive or even less, depending on traffic. And he came to campus and was like, hey, let's catch up as friends. And I was like, sure, yeah, okay, he's my friend. I like him. Cool. Yeah, I open the car door. When he comes into the driveway, I open the car door, and he's holding this really cute little succulent with a red ribbon around it. And I was like, wow, what a great friend. Sorry, I don't have something for you too. And then we're talking and stuff, and he's like, by the way, I know that you are going through a breakup right now, but nudge, nudge, I'm here too, if you're interested. And I was like, no, I can't, no, whatever. But then, it worked because we started dating. We started dating after a little bit, and he has been probably the biggest influence on me in terms of my decision to become a doctor. So he is pre-med as well, and he kept pestering me about being pre-med. He was like, you'll be such a great doctor. Like, you should do this. Why are you interested in marine bio? Why are you interested in business? Again, econ is another interest of mine. And an extension of that is administrative stuff, business administration. And so he was talking, he kept asking me, like, why are you interested in these things? And I realized, hey, maybe I'm not 100% set on these things. And I started thinking some more, and then the pandemic hit, and I realized, oh my gosh, yeah, like a doctor is what I want to be. Like, I want to be able to help people when most other people can't. And obviously, everybody has their own way of helping in the world. But I realized that medicine is the way that I want to help other people. But it was definitely thanks to my boyfriend when he kept pestering me, like, why don't you want to be a doctor? And I realized at the time, the reason I didn't want to be a doctor was I didn't have confidence in myself, because it was always something I had been interested in, but I didn't pursue because I didn't think I could. I didn't think I had the ability to do so. But then after taking all these science classes in college and realizing that, yeah, I do pretty well in these classes. I get the material, but also when it comes to patient interactions, like, I'm really good at that too. I'm really good at talking with people and figuring out what's wrong, basically, or how I can help them. Yeah, so that's kind of how my pre-med journey began. And classes at Wellesley, my pre-med classes, right now I'm in a chem class actually. And, I'm remote, but it is a class that requires a lab. So sitting right over there is this huge box of PPE and my lab coat and different chemicals and things that I am excited to toy with a little bit later on. But I really enjoy the science classes at Wellesley because they're smallish classes. They're about 30 people in a class, which is small for a college, I would say. And the teachers are so willing to help. They hold so many office hours. Like, one of my teachers has office hours at 11 p.m. And I'm like, what are you doing at 11 p.m.? Spend time with your kids. Please, like, have some time for yourself. But yeah, so they're super, super supportive. And the people in my classes are really, really great. So I really enjoyed my pre-med journey so far.
So are you seriously thinking of going to medical school and all that good stuff? Wow.
Yes,
Okay.
Definitely.
Wow, even as a classics major and the econ classes, and giving up your dream of being a marine biologist / what was it, archaeologist?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess we have time for one or two more questions now, but what are you up to these days, Janeva? So word on the street is you started working at a truffle company. How did that happen?
Yeah, so I guess a big theme of mine in terms of these past 4 years in college has been building up my confidence and just going for things, just not even thinking about failing, but just going. And that's kind of how this truffle thing happened. So I have always had a weird obsession with truffles, the fungus. And a long time dream of mine has been to start my own truffle farm. But that's something I want to do when I'm like 60, when I'm thinking about retiring. That I'm saving that for a little bit later. But I'm still interested in truffles in general for now, even if I might not be starting my own farm yet. And so during the pandemic, I realized I'm doing so many different things I enjoy, definitely, but are also connected to my career. And I realized I want to do something that has nothing to do with my career at all. Zero. Zero relevance to being a doctor or just career advancement in general. And something I've always done is just like check up on different truffle companies. Just like looking at them, seeing what they're doing, seeing what they're up to, exploring the interwebs of truffles. In the summer, I was looking at this one company, the American Truffle Company, and I thought about it. I was like, this would be really fun to work with. Like, this company would be a really fun company to work with. Like, maybe I can work with them. And just out of the blue, I emailed the CEO, hey, can I work with you? Or no, that's not what I say. I say, hey, can we talk about truffles? Basically, I get on the phone. I really did not think this was going to happen, but he replied to me And he was like, yeah, of course. And I was like, what? Really? Of course? Okay. And so we get on the phone, we're talking. It's like an hour into the conversation after we're like talking about, I don't know, the most random things related to truffles, like the Chinese truffle trade infiltrating like Italian truffles and things like that. It's just random truffle things. And then probably an hour or so into the conversation, mind you, it's been an hour, he asked, so what can we do for you? And I was like, do I say it? Do I not say it? Do I say it? And I said it. I was like, basically, I was like, can I intern with you? And he said yes. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Like, who would have thought? Yeah, so that's how it got started. And now I have 2 projects going. One of them is basically digging through. So far, I've gone through 1,011 scientific articles about truffles and trying to see any correlation between climate change and truffle production and yield. So that's one of the projects. And then the other project is basically going undercover and calling different truffle vendors and asking them how fresh their truffles are to scope out the competition basically. So I'm also looking at the truffle markets and different vendors as well. So that's really exciting.
That's super duper cool because it combines research. It also is, I think it's pretty related to biology and a little bit of economics in there too, looking at the supply of truffles and how that will affect the market. All right, Janeva, I think our time is basically up, but if you want to say one last thing to the viewers, if there's anything that you really want to talk about, excuse the construction. I think my Brazilian neighbor is basically creating a new building in their apartment. Ridiculous. But anyways, yeah, if there's anything you would like to share, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I told all of you guys, I did have a hard time in high school, but I hope you can see from my experience that it definitely gets better. Even if it doesn't seem like it's going to get better, it gets better. As long as you just keep going, you find your people and you have confidence, just go for whatever your dreams are, and eventually you'll get to a really good place.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janeva. Thanks for being so generous with your time. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and we'll catch you at the next one. All right, guys? Bye.
Bye.